This episode is brought to you by Mortgage Workflow Partners and the Mastering Encompass series, both for users as well as administrators. You can find out all the information about it over at masterengencompass.com. Also, if you'd like to check out what we're doing on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel using the @MasteringEncompass handle. And make sure you stay up to date on all the information, not just with podcasts, but also video content that we bring to you as often as possible. Now let's get on to the episode. Hey everyone, Larry Bailey here, Mortgage Workflow Partners. It is November 28th, for goodness sake. We're back here as a community. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Unless it's Thanksgiving, then of course we're not going to meet. So today's topic that we're going to be talking about are the best practices of disclosure tracking settings. We've got community conversations. We're going to, Amy, I don't know if you want to come up on stage and talk about your condition printing thing you got going on. Let me know about that, and I'll throw you up on stage if you want. But the whole point of these is to get together as a community at least once a week. If you can make both, that's twice a week. That's great. All right, I'll invite you up as a speaker. We can see what's going on in Amy's basement. And where'd you go, Amy? Where are you in here? And I think there's even a party out, and wasn't there a party or something Friday? There, I'll put you as a speaker. You can tell us all about it. Pardon me. So a lot of things have been happening around the topic of disclosure tracking. Amy's cleaning quickly. Oh, that's tomorrow, Brian. Thank you very much. I can't keep up. You guys party a lot out in Nebraska. I just can't keep up. It's Wednesday. That's tomorrow. Good deal. So disclosure tracking is one of those things that is totally annoying, right? Wonderful Dodd-Frank came out with TRID, and we had to talk about this, how we're going to track the loan estimates and the closing disclosures, et cetera. But before we get into that, we've got a community conversation going on, or at least between Amy and myself, with regards to printing the conditional approval, I guess is what you're doing, Amy, right?
Yes.
So printing the conditional approval. And for those, let me share a screen. For those that are not indoctrinated in the art of the carriage return in the standard condition. By the way, this problem doesn't exist in enhanced conditions, Amy, just saying.
You chastising me.
So if you type out your thing in your settings and you hit a carriage return, what that does is it drops a bullet. So if you're doing underwriting approvals, et cetera, and you want to have a nice bulleted list, what you can do is at the end of your description, put a carriage return, and historically speaking, that will give you the carriage return in Word and drop a bullet in there, and it'll look nice. And up until today, Amy, that's been working.
So yeah, somebody was putting conditions in yesterday, and she goes, "Where's my space?" I'm like, "I don't know." And so I went and looked, and it's not there. So, I mean, we've done this for years like that, and put that return in there, and it's just not working all of a sudden.
First, anybody else have any comments, questions, suggestions on that? Second, no other changes over the weekend, Amy, as far as what you guys implemented, changed?
Not that we did.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't think that would be affected by anything.
Is the return still there?
Department.
Like if you go in your condition, is the cursor still blinking underneath it?
No.
So
when I go back into it, it's just there's no return there at all. But when I save it, it looks like there's a return.
So if you go in and if you go into the condition, like the one I just created, and you drop your cursor down here below it, will it blink below it or will it blink next to it?
I don't know. Let me go look. Hang on. Right.
Candace, you always use Control Enter for that?
I tried that too.
Yeah, that's certainly a trick. I've never used Control. I've always just used the Enter key.
I tried Control Enter, Alt. I tried it all, trying to think if I could get it to work, and it wouldn't.
Did you try Control Alt Delete Enter?
No.
Okay, don't do that. That's a bad idea. Yeah. So I don't know, to answer your question. I haven't heard anybody else have this problem. I have not had a chance to test. And Candace, you obviously are using this. Your team is not reporting any errors or issues or printing or anything like that. Is that correct?
And we just haven't added conditions in a long time, so I don't know how long it's been going on. And we just, once you get your standard ones, you don't tend to put too many more in.
Oh, so is it working for your standard conditions? But this is just only a new.
Yep, all my old ones that work just fine.
Oh. Did you happen to update Word over the weekend from Microsoft?
Who knows? They could have, yes.
I would check. I would start there. So if you go back into an old file, if you go into a file that didn't have any problems, it prints perfectly fine.
Yeah, I go in the old conditions and I do, but when I go and I add the new conditions, there's no space after any of those, but there is after the other ones. That's a good idea, Brian. I can try copy and pasting from an existing one, see if that would work, and then just maybe change the wording.
And I want to be,
I'll play with it a little bit.
And too, Amy. So when you go in, you're adding from your condition, you're adding from your condition in the drop down. What happens if you just type and hit a carriage return? Is it?
I'm not adding in the drop down. I guess I'm adding it from in settings and e-folder setup under conditions that way.
Okay.
Not
yeah.
there.
So if you go into settings, we're talking about you're adding them in here.
Yep.
Yeah. So if I were to come in and I were to do a carriage return there and save, and I go back into that, it's never going to have the carriage return there.
My old ones do. When I go in there and look, I can, if you hit your down arrow, like on those old ones, I can actually see that there's a space.
Gotcha.
But I can't on the new ones.
All right, let's see.
Candace, I tried that control enter and that did nothing for me.
Let's try it. Let's see if it saves. Did not seem to stick here. So I don't know, Candace. That's a good one, Amy. Maybe you're ahead of the curve. So you're talking about in the settings here. What I've always found, I'm not really sure if it always stuck, but yes, that was what we always did when we created a condition in here and we hit the control enter or just the enter and hit save, and then brought that into a file and it did give the bulleted list. And when you go to print now, when you add those conditions in, Amy, if you go in and print, the bullet list fails. Jody, you're hysterical. Jody's like, have you tried Alt plus 013? Or I guess you're being serious.
Is that legit, Jody, or are you just are you messing with me now?
Alt 013. A heart? Oh, wait, 013 is the enter key. I like the heart. Can we do that after every
condition? That's so cute. Yes. I think I should just put one of those, and then everybody will know that's the end of your condition.
Alt 013. Just do hearts everywhere. I don't know why I did a heart there, but it doesn't do a heart anymore. Yeah, I don't. Is down here it did a thing. There it did a heart. I wonder why. I have no idea. Anyway, no plaid pad plus it's a carriage. Yeah, I would keep fooling around with it. I don't know. Everybody else seems to be okay. Amy, apparently it's just you, which is not unusual.
I guess I don't. Yeah, it's not unusual that it's just me. So I don't know.
Welcome to the world of Encompass, where you get your own personalized experience in troubleshooting when you have no time for it. Kevin.
Oh, so see, it's Kevin too. It's not just me.
Well, of course, it's Kevin.
I feel better. Thank you, Kevin.
Obviously, you just paid him $20 to say that. It's not really happening.
I know, Kevin. I'll send it to you after this call.
Hey, everybody,
you can come to the party Wednesday night.
Everybody, please go check with your teams to see if your commitments are printing out erroneously, or if they're adding conditions. Because, like I said, Amy just might be ahead of this. That would not be unusual. Okay, there you go. That's all I got. Katie.
All right, thanks.
You got it. Anybody else have any questions that we can't solve? It's always fun to get together and talk about stuff that that's not happening to anybody else. But we would like to know about it at least. But that is an interesting problem. I'm not quite sure what to do with that. Amy, I will find out from the projects I'm working on to see if anybody has a problem. Have not gotten a report of it yet. You got it, of course. So disclosure tracking. Oh, by the way, it's been 9 minutes. So I'm probably going to get yelled at. But yeah, if you're listening to this on wherever we post these things, check out the whole video on mortgage.community. My marketing team yells at me if I don't do that. So there you go. And on back to disclosure tracking. So I literally had this problem come up just before the call today. And disclosure tracking, what happened was it was a TPO file. And in this particular environment, we're actually we're on a project. We're on 2 projects now, rolling out the limited availability for brokers to self-disclose, and it's working out really, really well. But you've got a lot of settings that you never realized you had to worry about, and one of those is disclosure tracking. And what ended up happening was the field, the earliest closing was empty, and the LE-SEN, the SSPL, and the Safe Harbor were all empty. And it's because, of course, these were all excluded. So we had to go into the persona to make sure that the include exclude was unchecked for the TPO LO and TPO LP. Why is that important? Well, in disclosure tracking, some of the best practices is making sure that only the appropriate people can manually, manage these records. So if you haven't been into your personas lately, or maybe ever for that particular checkbox, always remember, because I don't know how many people remember, but always remember that you can go into settings reports and build out your persona-based report to go see who can include or exclude your records, especially if you've got multiple persona syndrome. You might be surprised as far as who can manage that. But I will say that some of the best practices, again, I don't know who does this, show of hands in the chat, but who's actually using whether business rules to automate the other tracking here. I also know that some companies made up some third-party tech to also go in here and fill in a date when some of these things are generated, making sure that at disclosure creation that some of these dates are updated. So that's an important piece with regulators learning. Sherry, Candace, I'll answer your question in a second. I just want to bring this up really quick. Right now is renewal season for mortgage loan originator licensing and some mortgage loan processor licensing so that they can continue to do their jobs legally. And one of the things that is really important is making sure that your disclosure events are properly recorded in the file, because it's what we do. It's why we exist in mortgage. We have to document everything, otherwise it didn't happen. So Candace, to your point of the other tracking, these are manually entered fields based upon your workflow. They're not tied to any particular document, which might sound counterintuitive because there is an ABA disclosure. There is a CHARM booklet for your ARMs, your Consumer Handbook for Adjustable Rate Mortgages. That's what CHARM stands for. Or your HELOC, or your first appraisal provided, or your subsequent. Even your home counseling disclosure, like all this stuff is in your disclosure package. So why wouldn't you just have it natively programmed Encompass? And the answer is because it never was. We're going to obviously see what this is going to look like on the web. In 2 weeks, I'm going to get my hands on the Encompass on the web disclosure engine for obviously for retail, right? Because it's TPO, I'm already working with that. So I definitely have some feedback for anybody who's interested in that as we are moving towards the web. And if you haven't joined the Journey to the Web space in the community, please do. More information is going to be coming out on this. We're going to spend all of next year focusing on this. Each month is going to have very specific topics to keep you updated, because by the end of the year, the goal here, the game plan for ICE, is to be at parity plus on the web. And so that means that as an administrator, you're going to have to be capable and ready to administer on both sides. And that's real. It's happening. Just absorb that, because your businesses are going to want to take advantage of a lot of things, especially on the sales side and especially on the automation side. So Candace says, we never really use the other tracking because they don't see the value. And I'm assuming they means the business. I would be surprised by that when it comes to tracking when you've delivered specific documents to borrowers that are required by the feds and by certain states. So I would check with your disclosure team. I mean, hey, if you guys are rocking along, you don't need these dates to be tracked here because you're getting that value from other places, great. Not every company has that experience. Some companies are getting cited because they are not keeping adequate reporting on when these documents are being delivered to borrowers. The appraisal dates are very important, as Chris states. And ABA, Luba's company deals a lot with ABA, so that's critically important for them as well. And Beth asks, are you able to add additional fields? No, but keep in mind, these are just fields, right? So if it's important to your business, like Beth does a lot of non-QM stuff, if it's important to track other disclosures being delivered to borrowers or TPOs, just create the field, add it to a reporting database, and then go there. So Candace adds, the tracking details are what they use. Where do these other tracking fields show up on print forms? Do you mean like reports? So if you're on the disclosure tracking, you can hit print here and you'll see this list over here. So Candace, are you asking about where do they show up in the summary? Maybe the details, is that what you're thinking of over here? So if we add in, if we just go ahead and add in, shucks. Now, of course, where'd that date go? Oh boy, I already did it now. There we go. So if I just fill in some dates here, I'm just going to fill them all in for today because I can. And I go to hit print. And we come over and I'll exclude everything except for details. And we'll just hit a preview and we'll just kind of go through and see what happens. Do they show up in summary? On the summary, don't know what the summary means, but in terms of dates that are in here, it will show your disclosure events. It's not really showing the other dates. Luba understands your question better than I do. Do you mean down here? Do you disclosure history? So this is the next part. If you're talking about in here, right, the disclosure history, this is a really important part of when I go through training with admins. Make sure that you're coming into settings here and loan setup and going to disclosure tracking settings and making sure that you've added to the top part up here when this thing comes up. Anytime one of these guys is either previewed, depending on what you have here, or printed, and printed means printing or saving, a disclosure event will be created. So a lot of times admins and businesses get stuck in the idea of disclosure means LE or CD. Not the case. What this is meant to provide is standard or custom print forms can be added to this section so that your team can effectively track on the print form, as Candace and Luba are talking about in chat here. It can actually effectively give you the dates of when they were generated and sent to the borrower, those kinds of things. So add your document to the top, and then when that print or preview, depending on your setting here, happens, then it'll be recorded in the disclosure history of the loan file. Now, I do want to talk about something that's on here. So pro forma CD you see is in my list of disclosure tracking settings, and that's definitely not recommended. The whole point of the pro forma CD, which again, it replaced the old pre-HUDs, is to be able to allow your closers to generate as many pro forma or the draft CDs to print and produce as many as you need if you're a closer for reconciliation purposes to attorneys and closing agents without it appearing in the disclosure history. Ideally, you want to have as few excluded events as possible. So if you want to take a look to see if your workflow is okay and if your settings are okay, go to your closing team and look to see how many disclosure events are not included in timeline, and it'll give you a sense of what you might have to address in your workflow. Candace adds in chat here, the appraisal provided data is the one in particular that is, quote, worthless for our investors. They want proof the appraisal was delivered. We have to go through disclosure buttons to generate the disclosure tracking. You can't add it to the settings. A lot of times, Candace, the appraisal provided is done through the AMC. So Luba gets also tagged by her investors that they want a read receipt. And if you don't use an AMC and your investors want proof that you sent it, and Luba, your guys want a read receipt from the borrower's email, that would never work with me as a borrower because I don't allow for read receipts on my email. So you'd have a problem with me. I'd imagine that your best practice workflow might be to actually get an acknowledgement. Maybe you send an appraisal received when you deliver the appraisal. You actually include a document for them to initial electronically to return. Maybe something like that. Somebody else. If it's working for Luba, what you're doing, great, but you might want to use like a custom print form, request that, make that e-signable with an initial signature sticker, and then you can have an e-signed acknowledgement that they've received the appraisal. Maybe. Jolene adds, we use the delivery email and print it to the e-folder. That's cool. As long as you have e-consent first, I guess. Luba adds either the borrower's email or the AMC proof that they opened the appraisal. Yeah, and to go back, a lot of companies don't actually use AMCs. They actually manage their own appraisal panel. And if you're doing that, you've got to go in. It's a pain in the ass. You've got to go into the disclosure. You got to go into the event and prove that they viewed it. Candace, is probably what you're doing, right? You're actually capturing the fact that they, to your point, you have to go through the disclosure button and generate the tracking, all that jazz, which kind of sucks. Sorry to have you go through that. So as far as best practices, the POS companies need to figure this out for us and provide proof to upload it to their portal. Luba, if you're struggling with the logging that you've delivered it to the borrower because your investors want you to prove that the borrower received it, that's a different perspective from proving that you sent it. So if you don't have e-consent, what are you going to do about that? Again, maybe all your borrowers have e-consent, but again, maybe they don't. So what do? You've got to show proof of the stamp. I don't know. In any event, the disclosure tracking settings are going to allow you to identify if you did generate the disclosure that here's your appraisal. You could track that if that's sufficient. And if it's not, definitely have to work around it. But I do want to point out that the disclosure history is fully enabled on the web for TPOs. I imagine it's going to look the same for Encompass on the web. And I want to make sure, I want to talk about this topic to see if anybody else had any feedback on your files for what you're using disclosure history for besides the things that we're all used to, which is your loan estimate or your closing disclosure. For those that are doing HELOCs, do you actually track your HELOC brochure, right? You don't have to use over here necessarily if you've got it in your disclosure history. So is anybody else using the disclosure history? First of all, for previewing, I'm curious about that. And then secondly, what else are you using in your disclosure history down here? So Beth adds for business purpose loans, because again, they do a lot of non-QM. They use the right to receive an appraisal to document that it was generated to the borrower. So that's pretty cool. Does anybody else have anything other than, like I said, I usually see the things that are put in here. I usually see the ABAs. I usually see other specific disclosures, but never things like pro forma CD. Appraisal acknowledgments I've seen. I've seen people track their payment coupons that they're sent out post-closing. Candace adds, POSs and Encompass itself treats appraisal as a wet sign doc versus informational. You can change that though, Candace. So remember, you can put any custom print form on there that you deliver and request that. Hey, I guarantee I can do it with a custom print form. Not the actual appraisal, but the acknowledgement of the appraisal. So Danielle adds, mind blown, we need to be tracking to receive the right to receive appraisal instead of manual. Definitely. That's why we need the appraisal. Candace, we have a couple minutes. I don't know if you're in a spot to come up on and we can talk through it. Mano a mano up on stage. Are you free to do that? I don't know if you're in a spot to talk, but I want to make sure that, oops, Candace over here. I'll invite you in as a speaker. Cool. Because I want to definitely understand, want to understand it better. I think everybody might get a lot of value from here in terms of the appraisal part, because we're all subject to the same thing. And if you're managing your own appraisal panel, you've got to deal with this. You've got to provide proof that you've done your job to deliver that appraisal in the timely fashion from what you need, especially prior to closing. So while we get Candace up in here, Danielle says, "Hey, we need to start doing this to the right to receive appraisal." So that's awesome. And think about other documents that you're delivering to the borrower that you want to track. Typically, you'll see this come up in post-closing, where you're getting cited for things either from your investors or from your regulators. And this is where you want to show that you generated it and delivered it to the borrower and how you delivered it. So yeah, the other tracking can be cool. Candace, is it working for you? I'm showing it's invited. There you go.
Am I here?
Yeah, you're here. Hey, walk us all through, like, what's going on with your appraisals? Like, where are you getting stuck?
Well, this is we're not stuck, but when you send the appraisal to the client, you have, in order to have the tracking, you have to send it through disclosures. You can't set it up in setup. But as much as I've tried between ICE and Blend, and that they always treat it as a wet sign document versus informational, and it should really just be informational because there's nothing to sign when you send the appraisal.
So you're talking about send, right? So you use this.
No, well, if you use send, you don't get a tracking record at all.
Okay, so if you go through, is it about, so in your case, you don't need an acknowledgement returned. You're trying to track via IP that the borrower received it.
Yeah, well, we just have to, currently our investors are just interested in the fact that we sent the appraisal. They don't really care if they opened it or not.
Okay, so if they're looking for proof that you've sent it, that's why you're not using this, because send file doesn't track anything, and you're using e-disclosure, and you're adding the document over. You're adding the document into the disclosure package when you send it to the borrower, right?
Correct.
And so what happens is when it comes over to the borrower, it goes into print and wet sign. It doesn't come over as informational. So, and then there's nothing to print and sign. So the borrowers get all confused.
Correct.
Right. So what I'm suggesting is, if you're really looking to track that event, but you don't need the acknowledgement, but you're stuck in this spot, you might want to consider, even though it's not required, you might want to consider just creating a 3-line custom print form that says, "I acknowledge I've received the appraisal," and put an initial sticker on there if you're using the disclosure button, because that will enable the DocuSign envelope.
Well, we have that, and
Okay.
they've used it for years, but they got away from the borrowers don't return that either.
Right.
So we're in old Web Center, if they didn't sign it, we had no clue whether they got it or not.
Isn't it enough? Isn't it? So in your case, are you getting stuck because you're like, listen, we've sent it, but there's nothing in here other than using the e-disclosure button. There's nothing in here to document that we've actually delivered it. That's where you're getting stuck.
Correct. So that's why we have to go through the e-disclosure button versus sending it or requesting it. But
Yeah. Anybody else having this problem? Like, I know, the folks, there's 23 other people on here besides you and me, Candace. Anybody else having this? I'm sure there's at least one other company who is managing their own appraisal panel. And if not, I would put that to the community for solve. Candace, are you getting stuck with, is this coming up in investor, or is this coming up in internal compliance audit?
Investors are always asking us if we try any other method, like using the acknowledgement form only and then sending the appraisal, or using the date. Apparently the investors are not seeing that we actually sent the appraisal. So
Right. Yeah. In my experience, when I come across this, the only thing I know that it's foolproof is the acknowledgement the borrower received it, which is done which is a condition prior to closing. And that's done via either wet sign or e-sign.
yeah.
So
and like I said, we do have such a document, and some of my team still sends that, and that along with the appraisal as well.
Yeah.
But not all clients sign and return it.
Exactly.
So it's kind of useless.
Well, that's where I've seen companies call it a private docs condition, where that disclosure has to come back because they got burned so many times and they're just tired of it. Katie asks, doesn't the send put a date into the e-folder? No, it does. Do you mean the log? It'll put a log over here, and you could handle it that way if you did a send file, but it sounds like that's not really sufficient for Candace's situation. But it's a great call out.
It's just something that I've been trying to solve for ever since we had Blend.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I could give you, Kayla, if you're on, Kayla uses Blend and she's new to Encompass. I don't see her on here, but I would definitely reach out to the community and I would call out Kayla in it, Candace, because I know they use Blend and they're a bank out of Massachusetts, so I'm sure compliance is on their mind every time. Amy adds, we do the acknowledgement that goes out with the appraisal through Simple Nexus. If they don't return it, they're signed at closing. Okay, that's cool. Last round, disclosure tracking, super sexy topic. Thank you very much, Candace, for coming on. We still have to do the whole milestone conversation, so maybe we'll do that. Sound like a plan?
And my closing manager surprised me. She's on the call too, so she's been
you never know
me messages.
Yeah, that's awesome. Please update us if you guys come to a different decision. We'd love to hear about it. And this is how we learn together. This is why we're a community. So I appreciate the feedback. And who's your manager, Candace? Next time I'll give you a heads up if they hop on. I'll give you.
Kim Kaus.
Oh, Kim. Okay. Candace, Kim's on the call. Be careful what you say. Hi, Kim. Anyway, who knew this is gonna? Yeah, you never know who's on. That's why I always get in trouble, because I just say the way it is, and sometimes I get it wrong, sometimes I get it right. I think we really bled this one dry. If anybody thinks of some really cool disclosure tracking settings things on the way you track, or if you've come up with some inventive ways to keep the regulators happy, or your closing managers happy, or your post closers, et cetera, or your auditors, I'd love to hear about it. Seriously, like, I think this is completely underused. It's an easy print button, and when I go through projects, it's an easy thing. Yeah, I think again, it depends, Candace. So here's the deal on the others, and this is for everybody. If the log of the dates is fine, use it. But if somebody's like, prove to me you sent it, okay, well, I can go in here and I can say I sent it, right, in e-disclosure tracking, but it doesn't mean they viewed it. Like I can show that I sent it here, and I can show what was included. And as somebody said earlier, I think it was Katie, over here, you can do a print of the log and you can see what files were sent. But, you know, this gets really into unique situations for you and your company and what technology you're using and what your policy and procedure is. And if your investors and regulators are going to accept it. And if they're not, then you've got to pivot into something that they will. Luba adds, what if you upload it to Blend as up, then you have comments that it was sent? Comments that it was sent. I don't know. Again, I think this is really a personal question, and you got to explore this with your tech. And this is why I'm always about leveraging native. Always, always, always. I don't know if there's a better answer than what we've discovered here today as a group. But if you're listening to this or watching this afterwards, and you've got more to add, please do. Could go on and on here, but I do want to respect everyone's time. It's been about 30 minutes. Jolene adds, because Jolene's company is a Blend also, we've had to do that in Blend, snip of the delivery, and then send that to the investors. You mean like a screenshot of the thing, right, Jolene? Like a screenshot of the Blend action that you've sent it, that kind of a thing, yeah. Yeah, so if that works, you know, and that's better, okay. When you send, I don't think I have a send in here. When you send it through Encompass, yeah, I don't. It'll just, if you click on it, it'll give you like, you know, sent the file, but it's not, it doesn't give you the IP addresses and stuff like that.
I have to drop off. I have another meeting.
Yeah, we all do. Everybody have a great day. Candace, thanks as always. I look forward to us catching up on milestones. Everybody have a good end of the month. Good luck. All the best. See you Thursday. See you on the community. Bye, everybody.